The gentle rays of the morning sun illuminated Emily Carter's face as she stood in front of the grand doors of Hale Manor, her eyes sparkling with determination. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed the doorbell, a simple but significant gesture, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Beside her was an old suitcase, not only filled with simple clothes but also with her dreams and aspirations. The door opened, and Emily was met by Victor Hale, an imposing man with piercing eyes. His gaze could make others feel small, but Emily stood firm, her eyes unwavering. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm Emily Carter, here to apply for the housekeeper position. Here are my resume and letters of recommendation." She handed over the documents with one hand, striving not to show her tension. Victor did not smile as he took the packet, his eyes scanning each line meticulously, as if searching for a reason to dismiss her presence. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice deep and resolute. "Emily Carter," he said, "this house is not just a place to live. It symbolizes my reputation and success. I demand perfection in everything, especially in the management of this estate. I do not tolerate delays or excuses. Are you prepared to commit to that?" Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility she was about to undertake. "Mr. Hale," she replied, "I fully understand how important this is to you. I take great pride in my work ethic and am committed to giving my all. I won't just meet your expectations. I intend to exceed them. I'm here to ensure that everything in this house achieves the level of perfection you desire." Victor assessed the sincerity in Emily's eyes and finally gave a slight nod. "Emily, you'll start tomorrow," he said. "We'll see if you can keep your promise." The next morning brought a sense of renewal, and Emily woke up early, her heart full of resolve. The soft sunlight filtered through the curtains of her modest room, promising a day full of challenges but also hope. She knew that every action she took would reflect her gratitude for this opportunity, and she did not want to overlook a single detail. On her way down to the kitchen, Emily encountered Grace Hale, Victor's wife, who radiated warmth and friendliness. "Good morning, Emily." Grace greeted her with a gentle smile. "I hope you slept well. I know the first day can be a bit overwhelming, but don't worry. I'm here if you need any help. Why don't we prepare breakfast together, so I can guide you and help you get to know the house better?" Emily felt comforted by Grace's kindness and smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Hale. Your support means so much. I'm a little nervous, but I'm eager to get started and do a good job." During breakfast, Grace shared insights about Victor's routines and preferences. "My husband likes the library tidied early, and the garden must always be pristine," she explained. "These small details matter a lot." Emily nodded gratefully. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Hale. I'll do my best to make sure everything is as it should be." Feeling more confident thanks to Grace's help, Emily began her first day of work with determination and hope, ready to tackle whatever challenges the grand house might present. Emily Carter diligently cleaned the rooms of Hale Manor, her concentration unbroken as she prepared lunch, attending to every tiny detail. Grace Hale, the graceful woman with a gentle smile, would occasionally stop by, offering Emily encouraging words. When Victor Hale, the authoritative man with the stern eyes, returned at the end of the day, Grace smiled with pride as she introduced Emily's work. "Victor, look," Grace began, her voice full of warmth. "Emily has worked very hard today, following everything we asked of her. I think you'll notice the difference." Victor paused, his sharp eyes scanning the details of the house, where Emily's effort was evident in the neatness and subtle elegance of the space. After a few moments of silence, he nodded with a look of approval. "Very good, Emily," Victor said, his voice slightly softer. "Grace has guided you well. Keep this up, and I believe you'll fit into this household perfectly." Emily felt a wave of relief. A warm rush of emotions filled her, both gratitude and determination. "Thank you, Mr. Hale," she replied, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I'm deeply grateful for the trust and guidance from both of you. It's an honor to contribute to the prosperity of this house. I promise to give my very best every day." As time passed, Emily grew accustomed to the rhythms of life at Hale Manor. Tasks that once seemed daunting became routine, and she felt more and more like part of the place. Particularly, the warm bond she was forming with Grace became a source of great comfort. One sunny afternoon, Emily found Grace tending to the vibrant rose bushes in the garden. Grace looked up, her blue eyes sparkling, and invited Emily over. "Dear Emily, come here." Grace smiled, a smile that seemed to wash away all worries. "I've noticed you have a special fondness for plants. Why don't you help me care for these roses? I've always believed that a garden is the soul of a home, and I'd love to share this with you." Emily was moved by Grace's invitation, a deep sense of warmth filling her heart. "Thank you, Mrs. Hale. It's an honor to be here with you," Emily replied sincerely. As they gardened together, Grace slowly shared stories about the family. "This house may seem grand on the outside, but it holds so many memories, joys, and sorrows," Grace said, her voice gentle, yet tinged with wistfulness. "Victor and I always dreamed of making this a true home, a place where everyone feels loved and safe. Seeing you work so hard and care for everything with heart, I feel you share that dream." Hearing Grace's words, Emily was deeply moved. She smiled, her voice choked with gratitude. "Mrs. Hale, ever since I arrived, you've shown me such unconditional kindness. This house has become special to me, and I'm so proud to help care for it. I promise to look after it with all my love and respect." Grace gently took Emily's hand, her eyes glistening with tears, but they were tears of happiness. "Emily, you've become a part of this family. Your love and dedication have not gone unnoticed. Victor and I are very grateful to you." As dusk settled, the two women continued tending the garden in companionable silence, their spirits connected through the blossoming roses. For Emily, this moment symbolized the beginning of a new journey, one filled with hope and belonging. For Grace, it was confirmation that her home was being cared for by someone who understood and cherished its true value. The routines at Hale Manor continued, but Emily worked not only with diligence but with her heart. Yet not everything was smooth. One evening, while clearing the dining table, Emily overheard a tense conversation between Victor and Grace in the living room. Victor's voice rang out, low and serious. "Grace, I've told you before, this can't go on like this. You insist on doing things your way without thinking of the consequences," Victor said, his face lined with tension. Grace took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "Victor, I only want what's best for our family. I don't understand why everything has to be a battle with you," she replied, her voice soft but laced with weariness. Emily felt a pang in her heart as she overheard the conversation. Grace, the gentle woman who had shown her such kindness, was now visibly hurt. Victor, with his usual stern demeanor, paused for a moment, and his voice softened slightly. "Grace, everything I do is for this family. Sometimes you need to trust my judgment. We cannot always compromise," he said, his tone conflicted. Grace sighed, as though used to such arguments. "Victor, I have always trusted you, but I also need you to understand that all I want is what's good for everyone. I'm not opposing you. I'm here to build this family alongside you," she replied. Emily quietly stepped back, not wanting to intrude on their privacy. She silently withdrew, her heart heavy with what she had overheard. That night, as she lay in bed, she reflected on the darker sides of the family she had grown attached to. It turns out, wealth cannot erase pain and conflict, she thought. We all, rich or poor, carry our own burdens. Under the bright morning light, Emily Carter briskly cleaned the vast kitchen of Hale Manor. She diligently completed each task with care, though the weight of relentless pressure bore down on her. When Victor Hale entered, his face hardened, and his sharp eyes scanned the room. His disapproving gaze made the air heavy. "Why is this taking so long?" he said, irritation clear in his voice. "I would hope that by now you've learned to follow instructions. I don't want to revisit the same issues we had with the previous maid." Emily bit her lip to hold back her feelings of inadequacy. The past week had been truly difficult, with unforeseen mishaps despite her best efforts to manage everything. "Sir," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, "I have followed all the guidelines carefully. I'll work even harder to ensure no further mistakes and to continue improving." Victor rubbed his chin, displaying a rare sign of patience. "I don't doubt your dedication, but you have to understand that Hale Manor operates on certain standards, and I expect them to be upheld. This isn't just about preparing breakfast. It's about keeping everything orderly, efficient, and worthy of the Hale name. How can I trust a housekeeper who can't keep to a schedule?" he said, his voice tinged with disappointment. In that moment, Emily recognized the burden Victor was carrying. She looked into his eyes and replied with all the sincerity she could muster. "Mr. Hale, I understand my responsibility here. I know my work reflects on your family. I promise to do better and not repeat my mistakes." Victor observed her quietly for a moment, his gaze softening slightly, as if he had glimpsed the determination in her heart. "Good. That's what I need to hear," he said. "Show more initiative and efficiency. I'll be watching," he declared, before turning and walking away, leaving Emily alone with her swirling thoughts. Emily finished preparing breakfast, but Victor only grabbed a quick bite before leaving the house, clearly agitated not from hunger, but from the mountain of responsibilities weighing on him. As he left the manor for an important meeting, the tension in the house felt almost palpable. Later in the afternoon, Victor returned, and the stress within the household had reached a boiling point. Emily was cleaning the living room when she heard the sounds of a heated argument between Victor and Grace echoing down the hallway. The words were muffled, but the emotions were fierce. Emily didn't want to interfere, but when she heard her own name mentioned, she felt compelled to move closer to find out what was happening. Grace, with a firm tone Emily had never heard from her before, was defending her against Victor's criticisms. "Victor, you can't treat people as mere tools to serve your purposes. Emily has worked incredibly hard, and she deserves respect, not reprimand. We must treat everyone with kindness and dignity, regardless of their position in this house." Victor, clearly taken aback and somewhat hurt by Grace's defiance, replied sharply, "Grace, I have to ensure everything in this house meets certain standards. Do you think that's easy? I do what is necessary to protect this family. If that means being strict with the staff, then so be it," he insisted, his gaze resolute. Grace took a deep breath, striving to remain calm but unable to hide her feelings. "I understand the pressure you're under, Victor, but we can't lose our compassion in the process. What legacy will we leave our family if in our own home, empathy is sacrificed for cold standards? We might have a perfect house, but at what cost?" she questioned. From a distance, Emily felt both a sense of sorrow at seeing Grace defend her and deep admiration for her courage. Victor fell silent for a moment before responding, his voice colder than before. "If you can't support my decisions for the future of this family, perhaps you need to reconsider your role here." The silence that followed his statement seemed to tear through the air. Grace didn't shed a tear, but her eyes reflected profound pain. "Maybe you're right, Victor. If this is how you wish to run our family, then perhaps I can't be a part of it," she said, leaving the room with heavy steps. Emily, standing in the hallway, felt the heartbreak as though the very air had been sucked away. After that storm of emotions, she found Grace in the garden, her eyes glistening but holding back tears. The fresh air of the afternoon did little to ease the tension. Emily approached, her empathy driving her to speak. "Mrs. Hale, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I'm deeply grateful for you standing up for me. I'm so sorry for everything that happened. You did the right thing, not just for me but for everyone working in this house. You defended our dignity, and that means so much." Grace turned to her, a sad smile gracing her lips. "Emily, you've shown me strength and courage. Sometimes we have to make hard choices, but they can't come at the cost of losing our humanity. I'll be staying with my sister for a while, somewhere more peaceful, to think about what to do next," she shared, her voice wavering but resolute. Emily, moved by Grace's vulnerability yet inner strength, replied, "I hope you find the peace you deserve. Wherever you go, I wish you happiness. And if there's anything I can do, Please let me know. Grace took Emily's hand, the bond between them growing deeper. Thank you, Emily. We'll keep in touch, I promise. Who knows? Perhaps this is just a goodbye for now, she said, leaving Emily with a sense of hope and deep gratitude. Emily Carter diligently cleaned the kitchen, paying attention to every detail as she prepared breakfast. The house remained silent in the early morning light. Victor Hale, his strong footsteps echoing on the wooden floor, descended the stairs. He entered the kitchen, his face stern and lined with worry from the busy day ahead. Good morning, Emily, Victor greeted, his voice hoarse and serious. Today, I need this house in perfect condition. I have an important meeting at the company, and I don't want any problems when I return. Emily turned, still holding the tray, but responded with a calmness that even she found surprising. Good morning, Mr. Hale. Rest assured, everything will be as you expect. The manor will be perfectly arranged to welcome you back after your meeting. Victor paused, evaluating Emily's composed demeanor. I hope so, Emily. These are challenging times, and the last thing I need is more trouble. The company is in trouble, and I need my home to be a place of peace, not more stress. Emily placed the tray on the table and took a moment to carefully choose her words. I understand, Mr. Hale, and I will ensure that the manor remains the sanctuary you need. Mrs. Hale always said that this house should be a welcoming place, and even in her absence, I'll do my best to honor that vision. Victor sighed, a rare display of the weight he was carrying. Grace always had a generous heart, sometimes too generous. But you're right, Emily. This house must be a place of peace. I appreciate your commitment to us and ask that you continue in the same way. Victor turned to leave, but paused at the door, seeming to wrestle with a final thought. Emily, your dedication has not gone unnoticed. After my meeting, we'll have a conversation about the future. I believe there are ways to recognize your efforts in a more meaningful manner. Emily was taken aback by this unexpected change in Victor's tone. She could only nod, trying to keep her voice steady. Thank you, Mr. Hale. I'm here to support you in whatever way is needed. As Victor left the kitchen, Emily felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The conversation had revealed not only the vulnerability Victor tried to hide, but also the possibility of upcoming changes. She reminded herself, perhaps this could mark the beginning of a new chapter for this house, though I still don't know if it will be for better or worse. The day unfolded, and when Victor returned from his meeting, his expression was a blend of tension and relief. Emily, who had spent the entire day keeping the house immaculate, immediately sensed the shift in the atmosphere when he entered. Victor found Emily in the living room, where she was adjusting the last of the decorations. Without any preamble, he launched straight into the matter, his voice urgent. Emily, today has brought more challenges and opportunities than I anticipated. Tonight, I have an important business dinner, and there's one complicated detail you need to know. Just yesterday, I happened to mention to my partners that I'm married. Emily was stunned, barely able to process what she had just heard. Victor's request left Emily Carter completely shocked. Under the circumstances, I need you to accompany me and pretend to be my wife, Victor said. Emily hesitated, her eyes wide with confusion, but seeing the seriousness in Victor's gaze, she realized this was not a moment to doubt. Mr. Hale, this is really unexpected, Emily said, her voice still shaky. But I understand the situation. Exactly how do you expect us to pull this off? I'm not your wife. I don't know enough about you, and I haven't prepared for anything like this. Victor stepped closer, his expression softening when he saw the worry etched on Emily's face. I know it's an unusual request, Emily, but the company is in a very delicate position right now, and any hint of personal instability could spell disaster. I don't think it will be too difficult for you, as you'll only need to remain silent and respond to questions if necessary, which shouldn't happen often. Your presence beside me will project the stability we need. Emily took a deep breath, summoning all the confidence she could. I understand how important this is for you and the company, Mr. Hale. I'll do my best to not let you down at this dinner. Victor seemed visibly relieved. He thanked her, his eyes reflecting gratitude. Thank you, Emily. Your help means more than I can express. We'll get through this together, and I'll be by your side every step of the way. I'll make sure you have everything you need, from the location details to accessories, to feel comfortable and confident. With the decision made, Emily felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. However, there was also a hint of excitement, a chance to see Victor's world from a perspective she had never imagined. "I'll get ready, Mr. Hale. We'll make sure tonight goes smoothly," she replied with determination. While Victor went upstairs to prepare, Emily remained in the living room, contemplating the upcoming evening. This was not just a business dinner but a door opening to challenges and opportunities she had never dreamed of. She knew that from this moment on, everything would change. The atmosphere at the upscale restaurant was charged with anticipation. Emily wore an elegant dress, feeling slightly out of place as she accompanied Victor to the table reserved for dinner with important investors. Among them was Mr. Palmer, the owner of the company Victor worked with, a man with an imposing demeanor. After the initial greetings, Mr. Palmer's eyes flicked to Emily, his gaze curious as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. Sensing the scrutiny, Victor formally introduced her. "Mr. Palmer, allow me to introduce my wife, Emily Carter. Emily, this is Mr. Palmer, one of our most esteemed investors." Emily felt her cheeks flush. She smiled shyly but maintained her composure. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Palmer," she said, extending her hand gracefully. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Hale," Mr. Palmer replied. As the dinner progressed, he seemed particularly interested in learning about Emily and Victor's relationship, occasionally asking questions to gain more insight. At one point, he turned directly to Emily with a question she couldn't evade. "Mrs. Hale," Mr. Palmer said, "I deeply admire how Victor manages his business. In your opinion, what's the secret to balancing both a successful career and a harmonious home life?" Emily felt her heart race, but she glanced at Victor, who gave her a look of encouragement. She took a deep breath and responded confidently, "Mr. Palmer, I believe that in both business and personal life, the key is communication and mutual understanding. Victor is always transparent with his intentions and actions, and that has been the foundation of both a strong company and a happy family." Mr. Palmer nodded, clearly impressed by her answer. "An insightful perspective, Mrs. Hale. Transparency is indeed a crucial pillar in any relationship, whether at home, in the workplace, or within society." Victor turned to Emily, his smile a blend of pride and gratitude. "Emily always has a unique way of seeing the world," he said, his voice affectionate, and for a moment, Emily felt a new connection form between them. "Emily helps me stay grounded and remember what truly matters. That's why our love for each other is so strong and will continue for years to come." Mr. Palmer, now more at ease, smiled approvingly. "Mrs. Hale, you bring a refreshing perspective to our conversation. It's inspiring to see simple yet profound values guiding both personal and professional lives," he said. As the dinner continued, Emily grew increasingly comfortable, realizing that her presence was not only supportive for Victor, but genuinely valuable. That night, her initial anxiety gave way to a sense of satisfaction for having held her ground and expressed herself. At the end of the meal, as everyone said their goodbyes, Mr. Palmer made sure to compliment Emily once more. "Victor, you're fortunate to have such a wise woman by your side. Mrs. Hale, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I hope we can count on your presence at future gatherings." In the car on the way back to Hale Manor, Emily reflected on every moment. The conversation with Mr. Palmer had been a challenge but also an opportunity to show her strength and intelligence. She resolved that next time, she would never doubt her own capabilities again. Emily stood stunned at the harshness of Victor's words. She had only tried to help, and her actions had not caused any apparent harm. Trying to defend herself, she began, "I just thought," but Victor cut her off. "You're not here to think, Emily. You're a maid, not a company executive. Your attempt to help could have entangled us in an even more complex situation. Now Mr. Palmer has taken a keen interest in us, and that could make everything worse." The impatience in Victor's voice was undeniable. Emily struggled not to show the hurt she felt, even as his words cut deep. "So we'll have to keep up appearances," Victor continued, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. You will do exactly as I instruct. No improvisation, no stepping out of line. Emily fought to stay composed, even though she felt turmoil building inside her. I only wanted to help, not complicate things, but I understand I was wrong. It won't happen again, she replied, her voice steady. Victor did not respond but emphasized, remember this, Emily. There cannot be any more mistakes. You have a specific role here, and I will not tolerate any deviation from it. As Victor walked away, Emily was left standing alone in the dimly lit room. She took a deep breath, trying to process the harsh reality of her position and what the situation truly demanded of her. Emily felt as if this evening had plunged her headlong into a world she was only just beginning to understand, and Victor's harsh reaction served as a stark reminder of her true place in the manor. She whispered to herself, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm just a maid, just a servant, and maybe I'll never be more than that. I'm not Grace Hale, and I'll never be as brave or as smart as she was. She'd probably be ashamed of me. The next morning at Hale Manor was cold and quiet, with soft sunlight filtering through the tall windows, casting shadows across the dark wood furniture in Victor's office. He was on the phone, his voice calm but commanding, carrying the tone of a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question. Yes, Mr. Palmer, I believe a dinner at my house will clear up any misunderstandings, Victor said, making careful notes in a leather-bound planner. And of course, it will be a wonderful opportunity to discuss future business prospects. I look forward to seeing you and the others tomorrow evening at 8. As soon as he hung up, Victor called for Emily. She entered with her hair neatly pinned up, her hands clasped in front of her, maintaining a neutral expression. Victor wasted no time, getting straight to the point. Emily, we're hosting some very important guests for dinner tomorrow. I need everything to be perfect, including you, he said sharply. Your presence should be nearly invisible. You will serve, keep everything clean, and under no circumstances are you to engage with the guests, particularly Mr. Palmer. After the previous incident, I do not want any further mistakes. Are we clear? His words carried an unmistakable authority. Emily nodded, her voice soft but resolute, even as she felt the sting of humiliation. Yes, Mr. Hale, I understand completely. I will do exactly as you require and ensure the evening proceeds without any issues. Victor scrutinized her for a moment, as if searching for any hint of defiance, but found only obedience in the maid before him. Good, he said. And one more thing, he continued, his expression growing even more severe. After our guests arrive, I want you to greet them, then retreat to the kitchen and not reappear until every one of them has left. If I need anything, I will call for you. I want to avoid any misunderstandings. Emily kept her composure, though she felt the sting of being so clearly told to disappear from view. I understand, Mr. Hale. I will follow your instructions, she replied, keeping her voice steady. Victor appeared satisfied, dismissing her with a wave before turning his attention back to the documents on his desk. Emily closed the door quietly behind her and returned to the kitchen. She couldn't help but feel the weight of Victor's orders pressing down on her, as if they had turned her into a piece of invisible furniture. Well, she told herself, everything will eventually go back to how it was, and I'll just have to act like a part of this house. The anxiety in her chest grew as she contemplated the possibility of failure. I promised him everything would be fine, but if it's not, I could lose my job. Hours passed, and finally, Mr. Palmer and 2 other significant men arrived at Hale Manor. Victor, exuding confidence, welcomed them inside. Please come in, he said. Dinner is ready, and we don't want it to get cold. Let's move to the dining room, and we can discuss everything while we eat. The guests politely made their way to the dining area, taking their seats, ready for an evening of important discussions and high expectations. Emily stood silently at a distance, her stomach knotted with tension, bracing herself to fulfill her role perfectly and avoid any mistakes. Emily stepped out of the kitchen, nerves coiled tight, and greeted Mr. Palmer and the 2 other men with a reserved politeness. She gave a small bow, saying only what was necessary to stay out of trouble. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to our home. If you need anything, please call on me." Mr. Palmer raised an eyebrow with a hint of discomfort, looking at Emily. "What do you mean by saying you won't be at the table? Mrs. Hale, please join us. Your presence is important to us. Besides, your husband's concerns could very well be matters of your concern, too." Emily hesitated, a surge of anxiety washing over her. Accepting the invitation would mean disobeying Victor's direct orders, but she saw no other option. Reluctantly, she took a seat, her tension stretched taut. Throughout the dinner, Mr. Palmer dominated the conversation, enthusiastically discussing business and future plans. Victor contributed occasionally but kept glancing at Emily, as if to ensure she remained in her designated, almost invisible role. As Emily poured more wine, Mr. Palmer suddenly turned the discussion towards her. "Mrs. Hale, you've been rather quiet this evening," he remarked, sounding intrigued. "You are the wife of Mr. Hale, after all, and I'd think your input would be valuable. We'd like to hear your thoughts, as our company values everyone's perspective." Emily's face flushed with embarrassment and apprehension, but she recognized the opportunity in Mr. Palmer's invitation. She managed a small smile and replied, "Of course, Mr. Palmer. I've been listening to your business discussions, but to be honest, I don't understand much about them. That's more my husband's area." Victor immediately interjected, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Emily is a wonderful wife," he said. "She ensures everything at home runs smoothly, so I can focus on what's most important. But Mr. Palmer, I'd like to return to the topic of expanding into South America. You had some very intriguing ideas." The conversation returned to business matters, but that brief moment did not go unnoticed. Emily could feel Victor's disapproval and tried to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. Yet Mr. Palmer remained intrigued. Impressed by Emily's perceptiveness, he continued to ask for her input. Emily knew she was facing a challenge, but she embraced the moment. "From what I've overheard from my husband," she began, "I think the company is on the right track. However, I'm not certain expanding into South America is the best move at this time. My mother lives in Canada and mentioned that Toronto is one of the best cities for business expansion, with lower tax rates that could help the company grow." Mr. Palmer raised his eyebrows, surprised and impressed. "Toronto, why haven't we thought of that?" he said, looking at Victor. "Ryan, you should have shared such valuable insights from this intelligent woman sooner. She might have saved us from last year's product failure crisis. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't that your idea?" Before Mr. Palmer could say more, Victor cut in. His face darkened, and his voice echoed sternly through the room. "Emily," he declared, "is our maid, Mr. Palmer. She has no involvement in running the company and knows nothing about business. I'm not sure where she got those absurd ideas, but if I were you, I wouldn't rely on the opinions of a mere maid's mother." He turned to Mr. Palmer. "I apologize for any confusion." Emily felt her world shatter. She bowed her head, hiding her humiliation, her heart pounding as she faced the brutal reality of her position. Victor's words echoed like thunder, filling the air with shock and dismay. Emily, stunned and deeply humiliated, struggled to maintain her composure. "I only wanted to contribute to the conversation," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry if I overstepped my place. I never intended to disrupt or cause harm to this evening. Please forgive me, Mr. Palmer." Mr. Palmer reacted immediately, his face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous, Victor. You arranged for a woman to pose as your wife at a business dinner? Do you realize how this makes you look? How can I trust your leadership when you make such reckless decisions?" Victor, reeling from Mr. Palmer's fury, tried to explain. "Mr. Palmer, it was a desperate decision. I assure you this does not reflect my overall leadership. Besides, I will dismiss this maid immediately and handle all the consequences." Mr. Palmer interrupted, his tone still harsh. "Deception and a lack of integrity cannot be tolerated, Victor. This not only damages your reputation but also unfairly pressures Emily. She should not have had to endure this, especially given the unkindness you've shown her." Emily nodded, though her heart was a storm of emotions. "I understand your disappointment, Mr. Palmer," she said, her voice quivering but steady. "I deeply regret my part in this situation." Mr. Palmer sighed, his anger softening. "Your intelligence and composure are admirable, Emily," he said, looking at her with newfound respect. "I'd like to stay in touch with you. Here's my number. I hope we have the chance to meet again in the future." He turned back to Victor, delivering a stern ultimatum. "Victor, you need to seriously reflect on your actions and the impact they've had on the trust we've placed in you. You will be held accountable." The dinner concluded under a heavy cloud, with Mr. Palmer departing, visibly dissatisfied. Victor and Emily were left behind, each deep in their own thoughts. As Emily quietly gathered the dishes, Victor approached, his expression a mix of regret and confusion. "Emily," he said, his voice low, "I'm sorry for putting you in this position, but now we cannot keep you here. Your services are no longer needed." Emily, despite desperately needing the job, did not beg or plead. She held her head high, her voice firm. "Tonight opened my eyes. Mr. Palmer saw something in me that I hadn't even recognized in myself. I want to do something greater, and I know I can, without pretending to be anyone's wife." Victor looked at her, stunned, before anger flared in his eyes. "Get out of this house," he snarled. "I can't believe I allowed you to impersonate my wife. It's absurd to think anyone could mistake you for someone more valuable than a cheap maid." The next day, Emily, now unemployed, made her way to the humble home of Grace, who was living with her sister. Grace opened the door, her worried face softening when she saw Emily looking so defeated. "Emily, what happened? Are you all right?" Grace asked, ushering her inside with her usual kindness. Emily, exhausted both physically and emotionally, recounted the events of the previous night. The tension with Victor, the dismissal, and her uncertainty about the future made her voice waver. "I don't know what to do now, Grace," she confessed, her voice full of anxiety. "Everything happened so fast, and I feel completely lost." Grace listened, her face gentle and full of understanding. After a moment of thought, she grasped Emily's hands tightly. "You are not alone, Emily. I'm here to help. Things seem dark right now, but you are strong. Stay here for a few days. My sister won't mind, and you'll have time to plan your next steps." Grace's offer was like a beacon in a storm. Emily looked up, feeling the warmth not only from Grace's words, but from their genuine friendship. "Thank you, Grace," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I hope I can repay you one day for everything you've done for me." Just then, the phone rang, breaking the silence. A strange number appeared on Emily's screen. When she answered, a familiar voice surprised her. "Emily, it's Mr. Palmer. We need to discuss something important. Can you come to my office?" Emily's anxiety mixed with curiosity. Grace saw the tension in her face and gave her a gentle smile, teasing lightly to break the tension. "Don't worry, Emily," she said. "It might not be as terrible as you think. Sometimes, surprises lead to unexpected opportunities." Emily walked into the office building alone, her heart pounding. Sitting across from Mr. Palmer in his spacious office, she listened intently as he explained why he had called her. "Your ability to handle complicated situations under pressure is remarkable," he said, his eyes steady on hers. "I'd like to offer you a leadership position in the company. I believe your unique skills and fresh perspective could bring great innovation to our team. You'll be starting in the role that Victor previously held." Emily could hardly believe her ears. The leap from being a maid to a leadership role in a major company sounded like a dream. Yet Mr. Palmer's belief in her potential ignited a fierce inspiration within her. That conversation marked a pivotal moment in Emily's life. As she left his office, her emotions swirled with the hope of a new beginning. Lydia was waiting outside, anxious to hear the outcome of the meeting. Emily beamed as she shared, "He offered me a job, Lydia. I still can't believe it." Lydia couldn't contain her excitement and pulled Emily into a tight hug, celebrating the amazing news. "I knew you could do it," Lydia said, her eyes shining with pride. The two friends felt the strength of their bond, knowing they would face this new chapter together. In the weeks that followed, Emily began her new role with unshakable determination. She quickly impressed her colleagues with her adaptability and strategic vision. She tackled complex business challenges, earning the respect and admiration of those around her. Emily established herself as a rising leader, bringing a fresh and inclusive perspective to the company. Victor, meanwhile, had to confront the consequences of his actions. Stripped of his position, he endured a period of self-reflection and worked to learn from his past mistakes. Without the power and wealth he had once wielded, Victor began to rebuild his life, starting small projects to earn back the trust he had lost. Lydia, always a loyal friend, not only continued to support Emily but also found inspiration in her journey. Determined to advance herself, Lydia went back to school to improve her skills, opening new doors of opportunity and writing her own success story. Under Emily's leadership, the company not only thrived but also fostered a culture of inclusivity, recognizing talent at all levels. Mr. Palmer acknowledged the value of giving opportunities to those previously underestimated, and the company reaped the benefits of this change. Emily's story became a testament to the power of resilience and second chances. In the end, everyone embarked on their own journeys of growth and learning, even if it meant enduring pain along the way. What seemed like an ending turned out to be the beginning of something extraordinary. If this story inspired you, please like our video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more uplifting tales. We look forward to seeing you on the next journey.